My boss replaced me with his daughter, and 2 weeks later the biggest client specifically asked for me. Their faces went into full panic when I walked into the meeting representing my new company. The comeback was priceless. Imagine pouring 6 years of your life, every late night, every canceled plan, into building something truly extraordinary, only for your boss to walk in one morning and casually hand it all over to his entitled daughter. My world didn't just stop that day. It shattered, setting off a chain of events that would unravel the very foundations of the company I had helped build. The air in my office at Prescott Media Solutions that Monday morning hummed with a quiet anticipation, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the faint aroma of ambition. I was riding a wave, meticulously preparing for the Atwood Industries presentation, a potential multi-million-dollar account that wasn't just a client, but the cornerstone of a promotion I'd tirelessly worked toward for years. It was Edward Prescott, a man steeped in old-school Madison Avenue charm, who strode into my office. He was the kind of boss who built an empire from scratch, but his presence now felt like an intrusion, a prelude to something jarring. "Morning, Harper," he said, his voice flat, a young woman trailing behind him. She was impeccably dressed, radiating an air of effortless privilege, a designer suit that screamed trust fund louder than any words. "I'd like you to meet Chloe, my daughter. She just finished her MBA at Wharton." My professional smile felt like a mask, but I extended my hand. "Nice to meet you, Chloe." I didn't realize Edward had a daughter in the industry. Her grip was firm, almost aggressive, her smile cold. "Dad likes to keep his work and family lives separate," she asserted. 6 years navigating a male-dominated field had taught me a thing or two about subtle power plays. I met her strength, not with defiance, but with an equal, measured force. Edward, completely oblivious to the silent battle playing out, simply declared, "Chloe's joining our executive team, and I want her to take over your accounts, effective immediately." The words hit me like a physical blow. The room spun. "All my accounts? Including Atwood, the one I'd poured my soul into? But I've been working on that presentation for months. The meeting is this Friday." I stammered, disbelief thickening my voice. "Especially Atwood," he cut me off, his tone chillingly final. "Chloe has some fresh ideas that align perfectly with what they're looking for." He brushed aside my protests about building the strategy, insisting I just brief Chloe. Then came the true gut punch. "You're being reassigned to our legacy accounts. Brenda from HR will email you the details." Legacy accounts. The corporate wasteland. The euphemism for clients who barely spent a dime, demanded endless hand-holding, and offered zero commission. This wasn't a reassignment, it was a public execution, disguised with a flimsy corporate bow. "I see," I managed, my voice a thin thread. "And may I ask why?" "My performance reviews have been excellent. I've increased revenue by 32% this year alone." Edward's joy tightened. "This isn't a reflection on your performance, Harper. It's a strategic realignment. Chloe brings valuable connections and a fresh perspective. Translation she's family, you're not." They left, leaving me in a vacuum of disbelief. 6 years. Late nights, working weekends, countless sacrifices. All of it obliterated in a 5-minute conversation. The promotion I was promised? Gone. Handed to the boss's daughter, regardless of her actual qualifications. My phone buzzed, a lifeline, a text from Lena, our creative director and my closest confidant. "Conference room, see in 10 minutes, bringing coffee." Lena, at 45, had weathered 3 decades in this cutthroat industry. She was a survivor, a mentor, never one to pull up the ladder behind her. "So," she said, sliding a coffee across the table, "the prodigal daughter returns." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Returns? You knew about her?" Lena nodded, taking a slow sip. "Chloe interned here about 7 years ago, right before you joined. It didn't go well. She expected special treatment. Clients didn't respect her. Edward eventually shipped her off to business school instead of fast-tracking her into management, as she wanted." My bitterness surged. "And now she's back with an MBA and a direct line to the corner office." With something to prove, Lena corrected gently. And using your client list to do it, I muttered, staring into the dark depths of my coffee. Why, Lena? I've made him a fortune. The Lockhart campaign alone paid for the office renovation he's so proud of. She leaned forward, her voice softening. Harper, family businesses are complicated. Edward's been under pressure from his ex-wife, Chloe's mother. The divorce settlement had a clause about Chloe eventually taking a leadership role. This has been coming for years. The revelation stung. So, I'm just collateral damage in a family drama? I asked, the unfairness a bitter taste in my mouth. Yes, Lena agreed, her gaze holding mine. But fairness doesn't drive decisions in corner offices. Power does. The rest of the morning was a blur of forced composure. I processed client files, enduring the parade of colleagues, some offering genuine, pitying glances, others barely concealing their glee. In this business, success always creates rivals. By lunch, Brenda from HR had confirmed my corporate exile, 15 legacy clients. Most were barely active, their collective value a fraction of just one of my former mid-tier accounts. The message was deafeningly clear. I was being pushed into professional irrelevance. As I sorted through the Atwood materials, preparing them for handover, Chloe appeared in my doorway. She didn't ask if I was free. She simply stated, I thought we could go through the Atwood brief now. For 2 agonizing hours, I walked her through 6 months of my life, market research, competitive analysis, creative concepts, the intricate media strategy. I laid bare Atwood's unique challenges, their CMO's conservative preferences, the subtle political currents within their marketing and product teams that I'd painstakingly learned to navigate. Chloe took minimal notes, interrupting with questions that exposed a glaring inexperience beneath her prestigious degree. This strategy seems very safe, she commented, flipping through the deck with a dismissive air. Shouldn't we be pushing for more disruptive approaches? That's what we learned at Wharton. I fought to keep my voice even, the frustration a burning knot in my stomach. James Atwood is a 3rd-generation CEO, I explained. He signs off on every marketing decision. He doesn't respond well to what he calls marketing gimmicks. Trust me, I've tested those waters. Chloe merely offered a patronizing smile, the kind worn by someone who'd never faced a client rejection. Well, perhaps he just hasn't had the right person presenting those ideas. I'm making some changes to your presentation. More digital, less traditional, more aggressive messaging. My tongue felt like lead. It's your presentation now, I managed, forcing a neutral tone. I've outlined what's worked. You should certainly make it your own. Her smile thinned. That's exactly what I intend to do. By the end of the day, my files were transferred, the forced, exciting transition emails sent. I was clearing out my prime office, the one with the bustling view of the creative department. My new office was on the lower floor, a cramped space half the size, offering only a bleak panorama of the parking garage instead of the Chicago skyline. As I placed my few plants on the windowsill, desperately trying to inject some life into the depressing space, my phone buzzed. It was Samantha from Lockhart Industries, one of my biggest former clients. Harper, what is this email about you no longer handling our account? Is this a joke? I slammed my office door shut. Unfortunately, no. Prescott is restructuring, and the owner's daughter will be taking over your account. The owner's daughter? Samantha's indignation was palpable. I've never even met her. We chose Prescott because of you. Did something happen? Are you leaving? No, I said, carefully choosing my words, just taking on different responsibilities. Bad-mouthing the company would only confirm their narrative. This is ridiculous, she fumed. We chose Prescott because of you, not the company name. Her loyalty warmed a tiny, cold part of my heart, but I knew this script. I appreciate that, Samantha. Chloe is very qualified, and I'm sure she'll take good care of Lockhart. After hanging up, I sank into my new, smaller chair. I allowed myself precisely 5 minutes of pure, unadulterated rage. 5 minutes to grieve 6 years. 6 years of canceled vacations, working through illness, countless sacrifices. All for this. Replaced without warning by someone whose sole qualification was her last name. When the timer in my head went off, I dried my eyes, reapplied my makeup, and made a decision. I wouldn't quit. That would be surrender. I wouldn't fade into professional obscurity. Instead, I would excel so spectacularly with these unwanted accounts that Edward would be forced to confront his colossal mistake. It was a solid plan. Or so I thought, having no earthly idea what was about to happen next. The next morning, I found my new team waiting outside my office, a cluster of nervous energy. Unlike my former ambitious, high-performing colleagues, this group looked defeated. Years of slogging through minimal budgets and demanding, overlooked clients had visibly worn them down. "Morning, everyone," I said, unlocking the door, trying to project an optimism I barely felt. "Let's get to know each other." For the next hour, I listened to their battle scars, clients who hadn't increased spending in years, creative work that hadn't been refreshed in a decade, and a chronic lack of support from upper management. Basically, Leo, a once promising account manager, offered Riley, "We're the island of misfit toys. No one expects much from us," which is both liberating and depressing. Leo, I'd heard, had been exiled here after a clash with Edward's brother, Daniel, in finance. "Well, that changes today," I declared, straightening the meager nameplate on my desk. "Just because these clients don't spend millions doesn't mean they don't deserve our absolute best. And just because we've been sidelined doesn't mean we have to act sidelined." My team exchanged skeptical glances, but I pressed on, ignoring their doubt. "I want a complete review of all 15 accounts by the end of the week. Identify every single opportunity for growth, for creative refreshes, anything that can inject life back into these relationships." Maya, the most senior member, warned, "Edward won't approve additional creative resources for these accounts." "We've tried." "Let me worry about that," I countered, my mind already buzzing with a nascent plan. "For now, just focus on the opportunities." As they filed out, I turned to the towering stacks of account histories. The legacy portfolio was even worse than I'd imagined. Years of neglect had left these once valuable clients feeling abandoned. Most were small to mid-sized businesses, loyal to Prescott since its inception, but gradually deprioritized for flashier, larger accounts. Then, one folder caught my eye: Sterling Custom Furnishings. Prescott's very first major client, 20 years ago. A family-owned business crafting high-end furniture. The file showed they'd once spent nearly $1 million annually on marketing, now dwindled to a paltry 6 figures. I dug deeper. What I found was fascinating. Despite their reduced agency spend, Sterling's business was thriving. They'd expanded into 3 new markets, opened a flagship showroom in New York, and had been featured in luxury home magazines. Yet, Prescott's campaigns for them were fossilized, basic print ads, almost no digital presence. This wasn't a dead end, it was a goldmine hidden in plain sight. That afternoon, I immersed myself in Sterling, dissecting their outdated website and sparse social media, comparing their efforts to digitally savvy competitors. By evening, I had drafted a complete revitalization proposal, a strategy to modernize their approach without sacrificing the rich heritage that made them unique. The next morning, I dialed Arthur Sterling, the founder's son who now ran Sterling Custom Furnishings. "This is unexpected," he said, a hint of surprise in his voice. "We haven't heard from anyone at Prescott in months, aside from invoices." "And that," I replied, my voice brimming with conviction, "is exactly why I'm calling. I've recently taken over your account, and I believe we've been underserving Sterling. I'd like your permission to change that." A pause stretched, heavy with skepticism. "The last 3 account managers promised the same thing, Miss Harper." Nothing changed. "I understand your skepticism, Mr. Sterling," I pushed. "That's why I'd like to show you what's possible, not just tell you. I've prepared a presentation specifically for Sterling. No recycled ideas, no generic strategies. Would you give me 30 minutes to share it?" Another pause, longer this time. Then a low chuckle. "You've done specific work for us already without being asked?" "I believe in demonstrating value first," I explained, "then asking for trust." "Well," he said, the amusement evident now, "that's refreshingly different." "Fine, Miss Harper. You have 30 minutes, tomorrow at 9 a.m. I hung up, my heart pounding with a familiar, exhilarating rhythm I hadn't felt since Edward's pronouncement. This was what I lived for. The thrill of transforming a skeptical prospect into an ardent believer. That night, I meticulously refined my presentation, crafting mock-ups of a revitalized Sterling website, social campaigns showcasing their craftspeople, video concepts that brought their bespoke design process to life. It wasn't my most elaborate work, but it was thoughtful, tailored, strategic, everything this neglected account had been crying out for. The following morning, I arrived at Sterling's Chicago showroom 15 minutes early, taking a moment to simply be in the presence of their stunning, handcrafted pieces. The attention to detail was breathtaking. Dovetail joints so precise they were almost invisible, wood grain flowing seamlessly across surfaces, finishes that enhanced rather than hid the material's natural beauty. Arthur Sterling, a tall man in his 50s with hands calloused from years of working with wood, met me. "You're admiring the Hanson dining set," he observed, following my gaze. "The craftsmanship is exceptional," I said honestly. "The way the grain flows continuously, from the table to each chair, it tells a story of care and intention." He studied me with a new interest. Most agency people see furniture as props for their ads, not objects with their own integrity. And that's the problem with your current marketing. I seized the opening. It treats your pieces as products, not the art they clearly are. My 30 minutes morphed into 2 hours. Arthur called in his marketing manager and lead designer, captivated by my ideas. I showed them how digital storytelling could unveil their craftsmanship, how targeted social campaigns could reach affluent millennials, and how their sustainable practices could become a powerful brand narrative. "This is what we've been trying to articulate for years," the marketing manager exclaimed, thumbing through my presentation. "You actually understand what makes Sterling different." Arthur nodded slowly. "What would this cost, Miss Harper?" I named a figure, 3 times their current spend, yet still within reach for a company of their stature. "We would phase it in gradually," I explained, proving the return on each investment before expanding. "And you would personally oversee this?" Arthur pressed. "Every single aspect, I promised." "Then let's proceed," he said, extending his hand. Sterling is back in the Prescott fold, or rather, in the Harper fold. I left the meeting utterly elated. This wasn't just a win, it was vindication. Proof that legacy accounts weren't dead ends, but neglected opportunities. Back at the office, I submitted the expanded scope of work to Daniel, Edward's brother and head of finance, bracing for resistance. Within an hour, he was at my office door. "This is a 300% increase over their current retainer," he stated, without preamble. "And they've approved it in writing," I replied, handing him the signed agreement. "They're thrilled to be working with someone who understands their brand again." Daniel frowned, perplexed. "Legacy accounts don't get this kind of attention. We keep them on maintenance mode for a reason." "And what reason is that?" I challenged. He looked at me as if I'd asked the most obvious question in the world. "Resource allocation. We focus on the major growth accounts and ignore the potential in existing relationships." Or lack thereof, I finished for him. "That seems short-sighted." "It's not your place to question established strategy, Harper," Daniel said, his tone hardening. "I'll have to discuss this with Edward." "Please do," I replied, calm despite the tremor in my chest. "I think he'll be interested to hear that Sterling increased their budget by $300,000 after a single meeting." Daniel left without another word. But the confrontation had made one thing terrifyingly clear. The Prescott family wasn't merely reorganizing for Chloe's benefit. The legacy accounts were deliberately being starved, perhaps to justify their eventual elimination. My success with Sterling had just blown a massive hole in that quiet conspiracy. Over the next week, I replicated that same focused, almost obsessive approach with 3 more legacy accounts, securing modest but significant increases from each. My team's energy began to transform. They saw what was possible with real leadership and genuine attention. Even Leo, the resident cynic, started approaching me with proactive ideas for revitalizing his clients. Meanwhile, the office grapevine buzzed with updates on Chloe's struggles with my former accounts. The Lockhart presentation had been fine, not spectacular. The Hanson media pitch postponed twice. And the critical Atwood presentation? It was scheduled for tomorrow. I was deep in campaign analytics for one of my newly re-engaged clients when Lena slipped into my doorway, closing it quietly behind her. Her voice was low, urgent. "You need to hear this, Harper. Chloe completely gutted your Atwood presentation. She ignored everything you told her about their conservative approach. She's going in with some radical, digital-first strategy that their CMO is going to hate." I forced a shrug, trying to sound nonchalant. "Not my circus, not my monkeys anymore." "Harper," Lena's voice sharpened, cutting through my feigned indifference. "When this crashes and burns, and Edward will be looking for someone to blame. 3 guesses who that'll be, and the first 2 don't count." A cold, leaden weight settled in my stomach. She was right. Chloe would never take responsibility. She'd twist the narrative, claim I'd sabotaged her with misleading information. "What am I supposed to do?" I whispered, the injustice burning. "Edward made it clear these aren't my accounts anymore." Lena perched on the edge of my desk, her eyes serious. "Document everything. Every email where you provided guidance, every note from your client meetings, everything that shows you set her up for success, not failure." I nodded, already mentally scrolling through my digital records, cataloging the paper trail I'd need. As Lena stood to leave, she added, "And Harper? The word around creative is you're making waves with those legacy accounts. People are noticing. Keep it up." Friday dawned with a suffocating tension in the air. The Atwood presentation, scheduled for 2 p.m., loomed. Chloe had commandeered the main conference room since morning, her rehearsals echoing faintly through the glass walls, her voice growing increasingly strained. I deliberately kept to my lower floor office, attempting to focus on my reinvigorated accounts, forcing myself not to think about the presentation that should have been mine. Around 1:30, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar internal extension. "Harper," I answered, my voice still crisp. "Harper, it's Brenda from reception," came the urgent reply. "There's a James Atwood here asking for you. Says he's the CEO of Atwood Industries." My hand flew to my mouth, nearly dropping the phone. James Atwood, the notoriously private CEO who rarely attended agency presentations here? And asking for me? "He seems impatient," Brenda added. "I'll be right there." I raced upstairs, my mind a whirlwind. Why me? What was happening? James Atwood stood in reception, an imposing figure in his 60s, silver hair, the ramrod straight posture of a former military man. He turned as I approached. "Mr. Atwood," I said, extending my hand. "Harper. This is unexpected." His handshake was firm, assessing. "Indeed, Miss Harper. I was told you would be leading the presentation today. Instead, I find my team scheduled to meet with someone I've never heard of." I chose my next words with surgical precision. "There's been a recent reorganization. Chloe Prescott has taken over the Atwood account." "And why is that?" he asked, his gaze unwavering. "Our CMO spoke highly of your understanding of our brand." "It was a leadership decision," I replied, striving for diplomatic neutrality. "Chloe is Edward's daughter and has just joined the executive team." Something shifted in James Atwood's expression, a flicker of understanding mixed with thinly veiled disapproval. "I see. A family appointment, rather than a merit-based one." Before I could respond, Edward rounded the corner, Chloe close behind, both their faces a mask of alarm at finding the CEO in reception. "Mr. Atwood," Edward exclaimed, his voice forced. "We were expecting you in the conference room. Is everything all right?" "No, Mr. Prescott," Atwood replied, his voice blunt, cutting through the pleasantries. "It isn't. I specifically came today because I was told Harper would be presenting. I make time for people who understand our business, not for family appointments." The color drained from Edward's face, leaving him ashen. "There's been a misunderstanding. Chloe is exceptionally qualified to present a strategy for a company she's never engaged with." Atwood interrupted, his tone sharp. "I doubt that." He turned back to me, his gaze piercing. "Miss Harper, are you familiar with the presentation scheduled for today?" I felt 3 pairs of eyes, Atwood's, Edward's, and Chloe's, fixed on me, demanding an answer. "I developed the original strategy, yes," I stated, "though I believe Miss Prescott has made significant changes." And do you still stand behind the original strategy you developed? I met his gaze directly, my spine straightening. Completely. James Atwood nodded once, a decisive, almost regal gesture. Then you'll present it now. Edward began to object, but Atwood cut him off with a raised hand. Mr. Prescott, I respect your right to run your business as you see fit. I have the same right with mine. Either Harper Presents or Atwood Industries will be seeking a new agency relationship effective immediately. The air in the reception area thickened, suspended in a tableau of corporate drama. Edward's utter shock, Chloe's barely concealed fury, and my own stunned, disbelieving surprise. Finally, Edward nodded stiffly, a forced, professional smile plastered on his face, but the tension in his jaw betrayed his turmoil. Of course, Mr. Atwood. Harper will present. He turned to me, the smile not quite reaching his eyes. Harper, perhaps you could use this small conference room to review the presentation materials before we begin. I nodded, maintaining an almost superhuman composure despite the emotional whiplash. Give me 15 minutes, Mr. Atwood. Take 20, he replied, his voice softening, a hint of admiration. I want your best work, not your rushed work. As I turned towards the conference room, I caught Lena's eye. She stood in the creative department doorway, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. This unexpected, seismic shift was just the beginning, a transformation poised to reshape not just my career, but the entire power structure of Prescott Media Solutions. In the small conference room, with seconds ticking, I quickly downloaded my original presentation from the cloud backup I'd had the foresight to create. A quick scroll confirmed Lena's warning. Chloe had indeed gutted the strategy I'd meticulously crafted. Gone was the heritage-focused approach that respected Atwood's 75-year history. In its place, flashy digital concepts better suited for a tech startup, guaranteed to alienate Atwood's traditional manufacturing clientele. I restored my original slides, adding only minor updates. As I worked, the door creaked open and Lena slipped in. Need a second set of eyes, she asked, already pulling up a chair. Always, I breathed, genuinely grateful for her presence. Chloe completely rewrote it. It would have been a disaster. Lena scanned the presentation, a knowing smirk playing on her lips. Classic MBA syndrome. Thinking theoretical knowledge trumps actual client relationships. She pointed to a slide. Emphasize the ROI here. James Atwood is famously numbers-driven. For the next 15 minutes, we refined, Lena offering insights from her past interactions with Atwood executives. Her suggestions were subtle, yet invaluable, highlighting data, streamlining flow, adding context tailored specifically for the CEO. Edward's in full-blown panic mode, Lena whispered as we finished. I've never seen him so rattled. James Atwood almost never attends pitches, let alone demands a specific presenter. Why would he care as long as the strategy is solid? I wondered aloud. Lena gave me a knowing look. Harper, people like James Atwood didn't build empires by trusting institutions. They trust people. You obviously made an impression during your research phase. A soft knock, and Brenda from reception announced, they're ready for you in the main conference room. The walk down the hallway felt utterly surreal. Just 3 days ago, I'd been banished to the corporate Siberia of the lower floor. Now, I was walking back into the spotlight, an entire agency whispering in my wake, because a CEO had personally demanded me by name. The main conference room fell silent as I entered. Around the expansive table sat the Atwood team, Benjamin Powell, their CMO, whom I'd worked with extensively, Sophia Voss, their product director, and 3 other executives I recognized from my research. James Atwood, commanding attention despite his relaxed posture, sat at the center. On the Prescott side, Edward sat stiffly at the head, Chloe beside him, her face a masterful mask of professional neutrality that couldn't quite hide the simmering fury in her eyes. The creative team looked bewildered by the last-minute switch, shuffling notes that now wouldn't match my presentation. Thank you for your patience, I said, connecting my laptop. I'm Harper, Senior Account Director at Prescott Media. We know who you are, Miss Harper, James Atwood replied, a hint of a smile. That's why we're still here. Chloe's glare hit me like a physical force, but I kept my focus on the presentation. For the next 45 minutes, I guided the Atwood team through my strategy, a careful balance of traditional and digital, honoring their company heritage while positioning them for growth. I emphasized the craftsmanship that defined Atwood, drawing parallels to other heritage brands that had successfully modernized without losing their identity. James Atwood remained engaged, asking pointed questions that I answered with confidence. Benjamin Powell nodded frequently, occasionally adding context that supported my recommendations. The energy in the room perceptibly shifted from initial tension to growing enthusiasm. "What I appreciate, Miss Harper," James Atwood said as I concluded, "is that you clearly understand what makes Atwood different. We're not trying to be the newest or trendiest manufacturer. We've succeeded for 3 generations by being the most reliable, the most precise, the most consistent." "Excellence isn't trendy," I replied, meeting his gaze. "It's timeless. Our strategy simply makes that excellence visible to both your existing clients and the next generation of engineers and purchasing managers." James Atwood turned to Edward. "Your agency gets it. Or rather, Miss Harper gets it." He stood, signaling the meeting's end. "We'll proceed with Prescott Media as discussed, with Harper as our primary contact." Edward's smile remained fixed as he rose to shake Atwood's hand. "We are delighted to continue our relationship. I assure you that Harper will receive all the resources needed to execute this strategy flawlessly." After the Atwood team departed, Edward immediately summoned Lena, Chloe, and me to his office. The silent walk was thick with crackling tension, like static electricity before a storm. Edward's corner office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, felt like a visual reminder of his peak position. He sat behind his massive desk, fingers steepled, studying each of us before finally speaking. That, he began, his voice low and strained, was both the most impressive presentation I've seen this year and the most embarrassing situation I've faced as CEO. No one dared to respond. Lena maintained her professional neutrality, while Chloe stared fixedly at a point just above her father's head, her jaw clenched. James Atwood personally attending a pitch and demanding a specific presenter. Edward shook his head, a weary sigh escaping him. "In 25 years, I've never experienced anything like it. Harper, explain how you developed such a relationship with him without my knowledge." I chose my words with exquisite care. I didn't have a prior relationship with James Atwood. During my research phase, I conducted extensive interviews with their executive team, toured their manufacturing facilities. I spoke with their clients, their engineers. I immersed myself in their company culture to understand what truly differentiated them. Edward concluded, and apparently impressed Benjamin Powell enough that he mentioned you to his CEO. "I simply did my job thoroughly," I replied, allowing myself a flicker of vindication, but maintaining professional modesty. Edward nodded slowly, then turned to his daughter. "Chloe, why did you discard Harper's original strategy, given her obvious understanding of the client?" Chloe straightened defensively, her voice tight. "The strategy was overly conservative. My professors at Wharton emphasized disruptive approaches for heritage companies to avoid market stagnation." "And did these professors have actual experience with third-generation manufacturing CEOs in the Midwest?" Edward snapped, his tones suddenly sharp. "Their academic research is theoretical," he interrupted, cutting off Chloe's response. "This business isn't built on theories. It's built on relationships and results." He sighed, looking suddenly tired, the weight of the day settling on him. "This situation requires recalibration." My heart pounded, waiting for the verdict. Would he finally acknowledge his mistake? "Effective immediately, Harper will resume management of the Atwood account," Edward announced. "She will also retain her current legacy portfolio. Not the full restoration I'd hoped for, but a significant, undeniable victory." Additionally, Edward continued, "Harper and Chloe will co-lead the pitch for Valencia Pharmaceuticals next month." My stomach dropped. Valencia. A game changer. A multinational pharmaceutical company. Every major agency in Chicago was vying for that business. Co-leading with Chloe, who clearly resented me and had already sabotaged my work, felt like walking into a minefield. Co-lead? Chloe's voice made the word sound physically painful. Yes, Edward said, his voice firm. Harper has demonstrated exceptional client insight and relationship-building skills. You, Chloe, bring valuable strategic frameworks and a fresh perspective. Together, you'll give us the best chance of winning Valencia. It was a diplomatic solution that pleased absolutely no one. I kept Atwood, but remained burdened with the legacy accounts while adding the crushing pressure of a major pitch. Chloe got Valencia, but had to share the spotlight. Now, Edward concluded, his gaze sweeping over us, I suggest you both find a way to make this work. Lena, your creative team will support both the Atwood execution and the Valencia pitch. Let's not waste any more time on internal politics when we have clients to serve. As we filed out, Chloe brushed past me without a word, disappearing down the hallway. Lena and I exchanged glances. Well, she said quietly, that could have gone worse. Or better, I retorted, a wry smile. Equally low. Co-leading with someone who just tried to erase my work isn't exactly a dream scenario. True, Lena conceded. But you're back in the game. And you've got something Chloe doesn't, the respect of the staff who actually do the work. That counts for a lot in this business. Back in my lower floor office, my team was gathered, their faces a mix of awe and anticipation. News of the Atwood presentation had clearly traveled at lightning speed. Is it true? Leo asked, his voice hushed. Did James Atwood really demand you as the presenter? It happened, I confirmed, unable to suppress a small, triumphant smile. And you're keeping our accounts too? Maya asked, a flicker of worry. They're not pulling you back upstairs completely? Her concern touched me deeply. In this short time, I'd forged a genuine rapport with this previously demoralized group. I'm keeping both, I assured them. We'll continue the work we've started with the legacy portfolio. In fact, I have some ideas for Westbrook manufacturing that I'd like your input on, Leo. The relief on their faces was palpable. For perhaps the first time, these account managers felt valued, not just as caretakers of unwanted accounts, but as integral contributors to the agency's potential success. The afternoon dissolved into a flurry of congratulatory emails and strategy sessions. By 6 p.m., most of the staff had departed, leaving the office in a comfortable hush. I was reviewing the latest Sterling campaign metrics when Chloe appeared in my doorway. She'd changed into casual attire, though for Chloe, casual still meant designer jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. We need to talk, she said, remaining stiffly in the threshold, as if unwilling to fully enter my space. I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. Please. Chloe sat rigidly, her eyes sweeping over my small office with thinly veiled disdain. This is about Valencia, she stated. I figured as much. I want to establish ground rules for our collaboration, she continued, the word collaboration tasting bitter on her tongue. I've already developed a preliminary strategy based on my analysis of their market position. Of course, she had. Without any client conversations, without any in-depth research, she'd already decreed the approach. I'm happy to review it, I said neutrally, though I usually prefer to start with extensive client discovery before developing strategic recommendations. That's inefficient, Chloe countered sharply. We can refine the strategy after initial meetings. The point is to go in with a strong point of view. Or, I suggested calmly, we could go in with strong questions and actually listen to their needs. In my experience, pharmaceutical executives respond better to partners who demonstrate understanding before prescribing solutions. Chloe's eyes narrowed. Is that how you impressed Atwood? By asking questions rather than providing answers. By asking the right questions, which led to more effective answers, I clarified. Different industries have different expectations. Manufacturing executives value precision and reliability. Pharmaceutical leaders prioritize compliance and evidence-based approaches. I'm well aware of industry differences, Chloe said stiffly. My MBA concentration was in healthcare marketing. Then you know that pharmaceutical companies face unique regulatory constraints that profoundly shape their marketing decisions, I pressed. Those constraints aren't theoretical. They're practical, daily considerations for their marketing teams. For a moment, Chloe seemed poised to argue, but then something subtle shifted in her expression. "You've worked with pharma clients before," she asked, a flicker of genuine curiosity. "GSK and Bristol-Myers Squibb before joining Prescott," I confirmed. "I led digital compliance strategy for their consumer health divisions." This information clearly disarmed her. She'd been operating under the assumption that her prestigious education gave her an insurmountable advantage, only to discover I had direct, invaluable experience in the very industry we were targeting. "Why didn't you mention this to my father?" she asked, a hint of accusation. "He didn't ask," I replied simply. And until now, my pharmaceutical experience wasn't relevant to my accounts at Prescott. Chloe studied me with a new calculating gaze. "So you know the FDA marketing guidelines, the PAB code, the significant differences between consumer and professional pharmaceutical marketing?" "I do," I affirmed. She nodded slowly, seemingly coming to an internal decision. "Then perhaps we should approach this differently. I'll share my preliminary strategy. You identify regulatory concerns or client-specific considerations I might have missed." It wasn't quite the equal partnership Edward had envisioned, but it was a clear step forward from her previous dismissiveness. "That's a start," I agreed. "But we should also align on our approach to the initial client meetings." Valencia's RFP specifically mentions their interest in agencies that demonstrate collaborative culture and unified leadership. If we appear divided, we've lost before we've begun. Chloe frowned, a telltale sign she'd missed that crucial detail in the RFP. "Fine. We'll present a unified front to the client." She stood, smoothing her impeccable jeans. "I'll send you my deck tonight. We can meet tomorrow to discuss." "I'll review it and provide feedback," I promised, choosing not to point out that Saturday morning work sessions hadn't been part of my original plans. After Chloe left, I leaned back, processing the interaction. Her approach had shifted from outright hostility to a reluctant, pragmatic acknowledgement of my value, at least within the specific context of pharmaceutical marketing. It wasn't friendship or even true respect, but it was a definite crack in her armor of entitlement. My phone buzzed with a text from Lena. "Drink at Lola's. You've earned it. And I want details." Lola's was a small jazz bar tucked away on a side street near the office. Upscale enough for privacy, but relaxed enough for actual conversation. When I arrived, Lena had already secured a corner booth and ordered a bottle of champagne. "This feels excessive," I said, sliding in. "Are you kidding?" she exclaimed. "James Atwood demanding you by name, Edward forced to backtrack on your demotion, Chloe knocked down a peg. If that doesn't deserve champagne, nothing does." She filled 2 glasses. "To the power of doing your job exceptionally well." I clinked glasses with her, the celebration feeling both wonderful and slightly premature. "It's a victory," I conceded, but not a complete one. "I'm still managing the legacy accounts, and now I'm co-leading Valencia with someone who clearly resents me." "True," Lena acknowledged, "but you've changed the narrative. A week ago, you were being sidelined into obscurity. Now you're the account director who impressed James Atwood enough that he personally intervened on your behalf. That story will follow you throughout your career." She had a point. Advertising, after all, was as much about narrative as anything else, and the story of my professional identity had just taken a dramatic turn for the better. "Chloe came to see me after hours," I recounted, detailing the interaction. "She's already developed a strategy for Valencia without any client input." Lena snorted. "Typical. The Prescotts have always valued decisive action over thoughtful consideration. Edward built this agency by being first to market, even if the approaches weren't fully baked. That works for some clients, but pharmaceuticals are different," I explained. "They operate in such a regulated environment that they're naturally conservative. Pushing too hard, too fast, just makes them nervous." "Which you know from experience," Lena noted. Experience I'm guessing Chloe doesn't have, despite her fancy MBA. "She's studied healthcare marketing academically," I confirmed, "but there's a world of difference between case studies and actually navigating FDA regulations with real clients and real consequences." "So, you have leverage," Lena concluded, refilling our glasses. knowledge she needs, but can't easily acquire before the pitch. I hadn't thought of it that way, but she was absolutely right. My practical experience gave me something invaluable, something Chloe couldn't simply override or dismiss without jeopardizing the entire pitch. The question is, Lena continued, her gaze serious, how do you use that leverage? Not just to win Valencia, but to secure your position long-term. It was the question I'd been actively avoiding. Winning Valencia would be a huge professional achievement, but it wouldn't resolve the deeper power dynamics at Prescott. Chloe was still the owner's daughter, still positioned for eventual leadership regardless of her qualifications. I need to make myself indispensable, I mused aloud. Not just to clients, but to the agency's success. Exactly, Lena agreed. Client relationships are powerful, but they can be transient. You need structural leverage. Like the legacy accounts, I realized suddenly. Everyone's been treating them as dead weight, but I've already proven there's untapped potential there. If I can revitalize even half of them, I become the growth engine for an overlooked segment of the business. Lena finished for me, very smart. And with Atwood back in your portfolio, plus potential Valencia success, you demonstrate value across all client tiers. The strategy was rapidly taking shape in my mind, but I knew I'd need more internal allies than just Lena and my small team. Lena smiled mischievously. You might have more allies than you realize. Edward's brother, Daniel, is furious about the Atwood situation. Furious at me? I asked, confused. At Edward, Lena clarified. He believes the strategic realignment that gave Chloe your accounts was hasty and ill-considered. He was against bringing her directly into leadership without proper agency experience. This was completely unexpected. Daniel Prescott had always seemed to be Edward's unwavering shadow. Why would he share that with you? I asked skeptically. Because we dated briefly in the early days of the agency, Lena replied with a playful wink, before I realized I preferred women. We've remained friends, and he still confides in me occasionally, especially when he's frustrated with Edward's decisions. The revelation completely shifted my understanding of the agency's internal power dynamics. If Daniel Prescott was questioning his brother's leadership, there might be more instability in the executive suite than I'd ever imagined. I'm not suggesting you try to exploit family tensions, Lena cautioned, reading my expression. Just be aware that the Prescott family isn't the monolithic force it appears to be. There are differences of opinion about the agency's future direction. As we finished the champagne, our conversation flowed into practical next steps, how to approach the Valencia collaboration, how to keep building momentum with the legacy accounts, and how to navigate the complex politics of an agency in transition. Just be careful, Lena warned as we prepared to leave. Chloe may have been humbled today, but she's still a Prescott. And Prescotts don't forget perceived slights. I didn't create this situation, I pointed out. James Atwood did. Doesn't matter, Lena replied, her gaze serious. In her mind, you've undermined her position and embarrassed her in front of her father. That makes you a threat to be neutralized. The warning followed me home, tempering my celebration with a chilling caution. I'd won a significant battle, but the larger conflict was just beginning. As I reviewed Chloe's Valencia strategy that night, predictably aggressive, innovative, yet utterly tone-deaf to regulatory realities, I realized just how precarious my position remained, despite the day's triumph. Saturday morning found me at a bustling coffee shop, meticulously preparing for my meeting with Chloe. I'd annotated her Valencia presentation with extensive notes on regulatory concerns, market-specific nuances, and client sensitivities, all drawn from my deep well of pharmaceutical experience. My approach was deliberately constructive, not critical, highlighting opportunities to strengthen her strategy, rather than simply dissecting its flaws. Chloe arrived precisely on time, dressed in athleisure wear that screamed designer, casual for her still meant a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She ordered a ridiculously complex coffee concoction before joining me. You've reviewed the deck, she asked, without preamble. Thoroughly, I replied, sliding my annotated copy across the table. You've developed a compelling market positioning. I've added some notes about regulatory considerations and client-specific factors based on my pharma experience. She flipped through the document, her expression neutral at first, but her body language gradually softening as she realized my feedback was substantive, not competitive. These FDA citation references are helpful, she acknowledged, her voice almost grudging. And your point about their previous compliance issues with social media marketing is well taken. Valencia was fined last year for influencer content that made implied claims without proper substantiation, I explained. They're particularly sensitive about digital recommendations as a result. Chloe nodded, making her own notes. That explains their emphasis on compliance protocols in the RFP. She looked up, a flicker of genuine curiosity in her eyes. How do you know their CMO previously worked at Johnson & Johnson? That wasn't in the company materials. LinkedIn and industry news, I replied. I make it a practice to research the actual people making decisions, not just the company profiles. Isabella Dantas spent 15 years at J&J before joining Valencia. She was known for prioritizing long-term brand building over short-term sales activation, which suggests she might resist our more aggressive growth recommendations. Chloe paused, a glimmer of quicker strategic thinking than I'd given her credit for. Not necessarily resist, I clarified, but she'll want to see the balance between immediate results and sustainable brand equity. J&J is famous for its patient-first approach. That perspective doesn't just disappear when executives change companies. For the next 2 hours, we worked through the presentation, finding unexpected common ground despite our vastly different approaches. Chloe's academic training provided a strong grasp of market analysis. My practical experience offered crucial context on industry-specific constraints and client expectations. We should request a tour of their research facilities as part of our discovery process, I suggested as we wrapped up. Pharmaceutical executives appreciate agencies that show interest in their science, not just their marketing challenges. Good point, Chloe agreed, making a note. We could also invite their regulatory affairs director to the initial meeting. Shows we understand the compliance team's role in their marketing decisions. I nodded, pleasantly surprised by her insight. Exactly. Breaking down the typical silos between marketing and regulatory demonstrates we understand their unique challenges. As we gathered our materials, an awkward silence settled between us. We'd managed a productive 2 hours, but the underlying tension remained. Look, Chloe finally said, about the Atwood situation. It's business, I interrupted gently, wanting to avoid unnecessary drama. You didn't create the reorganization, and I didn't engineer James Atwood's intervention. We're both just navigating the situation as professionals. She studied me for a moment, weighing my diplomatic framing. Fair enough, she finally conceded. For what it's worth, your original Atwood strategy was solid. I should have incorporated more of it rather than starting from scratch. The admission clearly cost her pride, making it all the more meaningful. Thank you, I replied simply. And your Valencia analysis is impressively thorough. With some refinement to address industry-specific nuances, it could be exactly what they're looking for. We parted ways with cautious professional respect. Not friendship, not an alliance, but perhaps the fragile beginning of a workable collaboration. As I watched her slide into her luxury SUV, I wondered if this tentative truce would survive the pressures of the coming weeks. The Valencia pitch would test not just our strategic thinking, but our ability to present a unified front despite our complicated history. Monday morning brought a new, unsettling development. I arrived to find my team gathered around Maya's computer, expressions ranging from concern to outright alarm. What's happening? I asked, setting down my coffee. Westbrook Manufacturing just announced an agency review, Leo explained, his voice tight. All their marketing partnerships are being reevaluated, including us. Maya added unnecessarily, Westbrook was one of my larger legacy accounts, a mid-sized industrial equipment manufacturer loyal for over a decade. Not a marquee client like Atwood, but stable, profitable, and politically significant because their CEO regularly played golf with Edward. Let me see, I said, reviewing the announcement on Maya's screen. The language was standard corporate speak, strategic reassessment, ensuring alignment with future growth objectives, phrases designed to obscure, not reveal. Have they reached out directly? I asked. Not yet, Leo replied. This just hit the industry news an hour ago. I reached for my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found William Westbrook's number. The CEO had always been cordial, though most of my contact had been with his marketing director. Good morning, this is Harper from Prescott Media, I said to the polished assistant. I'm hoping to speak with Mr. Westbrook regarding this morning's announcement. I'm sorry, Miss Harper, Mr. Westbrook is unavailable. I can connect you with Laura in marketing if you'd like. Laura, their marketing director, was competent but cautious. Yes, please, I replied, guessing she'd have more insight. After a brief hold, Laura's voice came through, sounding harried. Harper, I was planning to call you today. I guess you've seen the announcement. Just now, I confirmed. I wanted to understand the situation directly from you. Is there something specific prompting the review? Laura hesitated. It's complicated. The official line is that we're evaluating all vendor relationships as part of our 3-year planning process. And unofficially? I pressed gently. Another pause, heavy with unspoken information. Look, I probably shouldn't say this, but James Atwood called William last week. They serve on a manufacturing industry board together. James mentioned that Prescott had undergone some recent staffing changes that initially concerned him, but that a Harper had ultimately impressed him enough to maintain the relationship. My heart hammered in my chest. James Atwood hadn't just demanded me as his presenter. He'd openly discussed the situation with other industry leaders. William was surprised to hear about staffing changes affecting client accounts, Laura continued, especially since we hadn't been notified about any transitions at Prescott. He started asking questions about our account team, and well, here we are. I see, I replied, my mind racing. Laura, I'd like to request a meeting with you and William as soon as possible to discuss how Prescott can continue supporting Westbrook's objectives. We're scheduling presentations with all potential agencies over the next 2 weeks, she explained. Brenda from our office will send the RFP and meeting details today. After hanging up, I sat motionless, processing this seismic development. What had begun as a personal professional setback was now evolving into something with much broader, agency-wide implications. If James Atwood was discussing Prescott's internal reorganization with other industry leaders, the ripple effects could extend far beyond single accounts. I needed to inform Edward immediately. But first, I gathered my team. Listen up, everyone, I said, my voice firm, clear. This isn't just about Westbrook. We need to contact every client in our portfolio today. Check in, reaffirm our commitment, and get ahead of any concerns before they become formal reviews. What exactly do we tell them? Leo asked, ever practical. We can't exactly say, sorry you got dumped into the legacy account wasteland, but we still value your business. We tell them the truth, I countered. That Prescott is evolving its account structure to provide more specialized attention to established clients with growth potential. We emphasize the dedicated resources now focused on their business and the opportunities we've identified for expanding their marketing impact. The team nodded, energy visibly building as they absorbed this positive reframing. Leo, you take the manufacturing clients. Maya, focus on retail. Luis, handle the service businesses. I'll take Westbrook personally, plus check in with Sterling, since they've just increased their investment with us. As they dispersed, already buzzing with purpose, I headed upstairs to Edward's office. I knew the Westbrook news would reach him soon, if it hadn't already. His assistant tried to deflect me, but I insisted the matter was urgent. Edward was on the phone when I entered, his expression darkening as he saw me. He cut his call short. Harper, I assume this is about Westbrook. You've heard, I noted, taking a seat without waiting for an invitation. Daniel just informed me. He leaned back, eyes narrowed. Apparently, James Atwood has been quite talkative about his experience with our agency. That's my understanding as well, I confirmed. Laura mentioned he spoke with William Westbrook last week. Edward's jaw tightened. And now we're facing a review with a 10-year client, representing nearly $1 million in annual billing. It's manageable, I said calmly. I've already requested a meeting with William and Laura. My team is contacting every client in our portfolio to get ahead of any similar concerns. Your team, Edward repeated, the possessive pronoun heavy with irony. The legacy accounts that were deliberately consolidated because they weren't growth priorities. Perhaps that classification needs reevaluation, I suggested coolly. Sterling has already tripled their spending. Several others have shown similar potential with the right attention. Edward studied me, a complex calculation evident in his eyes. You're suggesting the legacy portfolio is actually an untapped growth opportunity? I'm stating it as fact, I replied, my voice firm with conviction. These clients were neglected, not inherently limited. With proper strategy and attention, many could significantly increase their marketing investment. The implications hung heavy in the air. If I was right, the organizational restructuring that had demoted me to make room for Chloe was not just unfair, it was strategically flawed, potentially jeopardizing millions in reliable revenue. And Westbrook specifically, Edward asked, his voice betraying a hint of desperation. Can you retain them? If I lead the pitch personally and demonstrate our renewed commitment to their business, yes, I asserted. William Westbrook values relationships and stability. He's conducting this review because he felt blindsided by changes he learned about from an industry peer, not because he's genuinely dissatisfied with our work. Edward nodded slowly, a decision forming. You'll lead the Westbrook defense. Full resources, whatever you need, and continue your revitalization efforts with the other legacy accounts. It wasn't quite complete vindication, but it was an undeniable acknowledgement that my approach had merit and that the agency now desperately needed my client relationships more than I needed their organizational validation. As I turned to leave, Edward added, the Valencia pitch team meets tomorrow morning. I expect you and Chloe to present a unified strategy and approach. We've already begun aligning our thinking, I assured him. Despite our different perspectives, we're finding productive common ground. Back at my office, an email from Chloe requesting a meeting that afternoon to finalize our Valencia approach confirmed our tentative alliance. Her tone was businesslike, free of hostility. The organizational turbulence was far from resolved, but the power dynamics had shifted irrevocably. What had begun as simple nepotism had evolved into a complex realignment of agency priorities, client relationships, and internal alliances. And somehow, I found myself at the center of it all, not just fighting for my career, but potentially reshaping the very future direction of Prescott Media Solutions. The Valencia pharmaceutical pitch became the unexpected catalyst for transformation. After our initial strategy session, Chloe and I developed a rhythm of collaboration that surprised both of us. She brought academic rigor and bold conceptual thinking. I contributed invaluable industry knowledge and client insight. Together, we crafted an approach that honored Valencia's conservative heritage while pushing their marketing into thoughtfully progressive territory. I still think the patient testimonial campaign should lead with emotional impact, Chloe argued during our final preparation session. We'd taken over Conference Room B, presentation slides, and research covering every available surface. Emotion works, I agreed, but pharmaceutical regulations require substantiation for every claim. If we lead with patient stories, Valencia's legal team will insist on so many disclaimers that the emotional impact gets buried. Chloe considered this, then suggested a brilliant compromise. What if we structure it as a day in the life content? Focus on how their medications improve daily functioning, rather than making specific claims about symptom relief. It was a smart solution, balancing emotional resonance with regulatory compliance, exactly the kind of thinking that would impress Valencia's marketing team while reassuring their ever-cautious legal department. That could work, I acknowledged. If we emphasize functional improvements rather than medical outcomes, we stay within the boundaries while still connecting emotionally. These moments of productive collaboration had become more frequent. The initial resentment was still present, a faint hum beneath the surface, but it had been channeled into a competitive creativity that elevated our work. We still disagreed often, sometimes intensely, but the disagreements now produced better ideas, not just friction. Meanwhile, my efforts with the legacy accounts were bearing glorious fruit. After the Westbrook review announcement, my team had mobilized impressively, reconnecting with every client, demonstrating renewed commitment. 3 more accounts had increased their spending, and Sterling had even referred us to a complementary business in their industry. The morning of the Valencia pitch arrived with an unexpected calm. Chloe and I had rehearsed extensively, each understanding our role. Edward would introduce the agency. Chloe would lead the strategic overview. I would handle the regulatory and implementation sections. We would jointly present the creative concepts. Ready? Chloe asked as we gathered our materials, waiting for the Valencia team. As ready as anyone can be when $10 million in potential billing is on the line, I replied with a wry smile. 20, she corrected. If they consolidate all their consumer brands with one agency. The stakes were indeed enormous, not just financially, but symbolically. Winning Valencia would cement Prescott's position as a serious player in pharmaceutical marketing, opening doors to an entire industry segment we'd only peripherally touched before. Edward joined us, adjusting his tie nervously. Everything prepared? Team aligned? Any last-minute issues? We're fully prepared, I assured him. Chloe and I have developed a comprehensive approach that addresses both Valencia's growth objectives and their compliance requirements. The subtle shift in dynamics wasn't lost on Edward. I had intentionally placed Chloe's name before mine, a small acknowledgement of her contributions, serving as both professional courtesy and strategic positioning. If the pitch succeeded, we would share credit. If it failed, we would share responsibility. The Valencia team arrived with formal precision, 6 executives, including Isabella Dantas, their CMO, their Regulatory Affairs Director, and, surprisingly, their Chief Medical Officer. The CMO's presence, unusual for an initial agency pitch, signaled how seriously they were taking this review. Introductions made, we moved to the main conference room where Lena and the creative team awaited. The presentation unfolded with well-rehearsed precision, each of us handling our sections flawlessly while maintaining a unified narrative. Edward established Prescott's credentials. Chloe outlined our understanding of their market challenges. I detailed our approach to navigating regulatory constraints while still delivering maximum marketing impact. When we reached the creative concepts, Isabella Dantas leaned forward, visibly engaged, always a good sign. Our day-in-the-life patient campaign clearly resonated, as did our physician education approach that elevated scientific substance over marketing flash. What impresses me, Isabella noted during the Q&A, is that you've managed to be both innovative and compliant. Most agencies give us ideas our legal team immediately rejects, or safe concepts that won't move the needle. We believe effectiveness and compliance aren't opposing forces, I replied. They're complementary requirements that, when properly integrated, create marketing that actually works in the healthcare environment. And how would you structure our account team? Their procurement director asked, cutting to the chase, specifically inquiring who would lead their business. Edward stepped in smoothly. Valencia will be led jointly by Chloe and Harper. Their complementary skills, Chloe's strategic vision and Harper's pharmaceutical expertise, will ensure you receive both innovative thinking and practical implementation. The description was diplomatic, positioning our co-leadership as an intentional strength rather than a temporary accommodation. More surprisingly, Edward now seemed to genuinely believe this framing, his earlier reluctance replaced by recognition of our effective partnership. After the Valencia team departed, promising a decision within 2 weeks, the pitch team remained in the conference room, simultaneously exhausted and energized. That, Lena declared, her voice filled with admiration, was the most seamless pharmaceutical pitch I've seen in 20 years. They're going to choose us. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Edward cautioned, though his expression betrayed his optimism. Their procurement team still has significant influence, and we're competing against agencies with longer pharmaceutical track records. True, I acknowledged, but we demonstrated something unique today, the ability to balance innovation with compliance, creativity with regulation. That's rare in healthcare marketing. Chloe nodded in agreement, her earlier competitiveness tempered by the shared accomplishment. We should prepare for the second round discussions. They'll likely have follow-up questions about implementation timelines and team structure. Her use of we rather than I was a subtle but significant marker of progress in our professional relationship. As the team dispersed, Edward asked Chloe and me to join him in his office. The potential Valencia win had undeniably shifted his perspective on our collaboration, his earlier skepticism replaced by cautious endorsement. Whatever happens with Valencia, he said once we were seated, you two have demonstrated effective partnership despite challenging circumstances. I'm considering how this model might apply to other major accounts. The implication was clear. Our forced collaboration had produced results that warranted replication, potentially creating a new leadership structure at the agency. The Westbrook defense is next week, Edward continued. Harper, given your success in retaining Atwood and revitalizing the legacy accounts, I want you to lead that presentation. Chloe, I'd like you to contribute strategic input, though Harper will make final decisions given her relationship with the client. It was a remarkable reversal, an arrangement that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. Chloe would still be involved, but I would lead. There's one more item we need to discuss, Edward added, his tone growing more serious. Daniel has been analyzing our account distribution and revenue projections. The legacy portfolio you've been revitalizing, Harper, now shows greater growth potential than several of our supposedly premium accounts. The validation was deeply satisfying, confirming what I'd recognized from the beginning. These clients weren't inherently limited, just underserved. In fact, Edward continued, if current trends continue, your legacy portfolio could generate more new revenue this year than our 3 largest accounts combined, simply because you've identified opportunities everyone else overlooked. Chloe shifted uncomfortably, sensing where this conversation was heading. This creates an organizational challenge, Edward admitted. Our current structure doesn't properly value or support these relationships. Daniel is recommending we create a new division specifically focused on these growth opportunities, with dedicated creative resources and strategic support. A legacy growth division, I suggested immediately, seeing the immense potential, focused on maximizing value from established relationships rather than just pursuing new business. Exactly, Edward confirmed. And we believe you should lead it, Harper, as Executive Vice President of Client Growth. Executive Vice President. The title represented not just restoration, but promotion, a seat on the executive leadership team, with direct input into the agency's direction and strategy. And my role? Chloe asked, her tone carefully neutral despite the obvious implications for her position. You would continue leading our new business division, Edward explained, focusing on acquiring and developing relationships with new clients. Your strategic thinking and innovative approach are valuable assets for clients seeking fresh perspectives. It was a diplomatic solution that gave us both leadership positions while acknowledging our different, yet complementary, strengths. More importantly, it created a structure that could succeed regardless of personalities, based on business logic rather than family politics. This restructuring would take effect after the Westbrook presentation, assuming we retain their business, Edward concluded. I'd like you both to consider the implications and provide input before we finalize details. As we left Edward's office, Chloe and I found ourselves in the strange position of having achieved an outcome neither of us had initially sought, a collaborative relationship with defined boundaries and mutual respect, if not quite friendship. Executive Vice President, Chloe remarked as we walked toward our respective offices. Congratulations. It's well-deserved. The acknowledgement, offered without evident resentment, genuinely surprised me. Thank you. The new business division suits your strengths perfectly. Valencia proves that. Assuming we win Valencia, she qualified, though her expression suggested confidence rather than doubt. We will, I replied with matching certainty. Our approach addressed exactly what they're looking for: innovation within constraints, creativity with compliance. We reached the elevator that would take Chloe to the executive floor, while I returned to my lower-level office, an arrangement that would soon change with my promotion. Harper, Chloe said as the elevator arrived, its doors hissing open. I underestimated you. I saw your client relationships as something I could simply inherit, not recognizing they were built on expertise and trust that can't be transferred through organizational charts. The admission clearly cost her pride, making it all the more meaningful. "And I misjudged you," I replied honestly. "I saw your position as purely nepotism, not recognizing the genuine strategic value you bring to clients like Valencia." We both made assumptions that limited our effectiveness. The elevator doors began to close, but Chloe held them. "Not quite finished." For what it's worth, I didn't know about the reorganization before it happened. Dad presented it as already decided when he told me about the position. This revelation shifted my entire understanding of the initial situation. Chloe hadn't engineered my demotion. She'd simply accepted the opportunity presented, as most ambitious professionals would. "That actually makes sense," I acknowledged. "Edward has always made unilateral decisions, then expected everyone to adapt without question. A management style I'm trying not to replicate," Chloe noted ruefully. "Anyway, we should finalize the Westbrook strategy tomorrow. I have some thoughts on their industrial equipment marketing that might complement your approach." As Chloe ascended to the executive floor, I returned to my soon-to-be former office, reflecting on the remarkable evolution of our professional relationship. What had begun as adversarial competition had transformed into something far more complex and, ultimately, far more valuable, a partnership built on complementary strengths, not identical perspectives. My team was waiting expectantly, rumors of the Valencia pitch and potential organizational changes having swept through the agency. "How did it go?" Maya asked immediately, her eyes wide. "Exceptionally well," I replied, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "And there are bigger changes coming that affect all of us." I explained the proposed restructuring, watching their expressions shift from curiosity to awe, then to pure excitement as they grasped the implications. Rather than remaining the overlooked department handling unwanted accounts, they would become the growth-focused division, identifying and developing untapped potential. "So, we're not the island of misfit toys anymore?" Leo observed, a glimmer of cautious optimism replacing his usual cynicism. "We never were," I corrected gently. "We were the overlooked opportunities division. Now, we're being recognized for the value we've already proven we can create." The Westbrook presentation the following week unfolded with similar success. William Westbrook, initially skeptical, responded enthusiastically to our renewed commitment and fresh strategic approach. Chloe's contributions complemented my established relationship with their team, creating a perfect balance of familiarity and innovation. "I'll be honest," William said as we concluded, "we initiated this review because we heard concerning things about Prescott's account management. But today's presentation demonstrated exactly what we're looking for: strategic thinking combined with a deep understanding of our business." Westbrook decided to remain with Prescott without even completing their planned review of other agencies. The decision arrived via email the very next day, representing not just retained business, but a powerful vote of confidence in our new approach. 2 days later, Valencia selected Prescott as their agency partner, citing our unique ability to navigate regulatory complexities while delivering breakthrough creative concepts. The initial contract covered their consumer brands, with explicit potential to expand to their professional marketing, representing exactly the growth opportunity Chloe had identified. The agency announcement of our new structure came the following Monday. Edward gathered the entire staff in the main conference area, Daniel standing supportively at his side. "Prescott Media Solutions is evolving," Edward began, his voice booming with renewed pride. "For 25 years, we've built our reputation on creative excellence and client service. Today, we're announcing organizational changes that will enhance our ability to deliver both." He outlined the new structure, my client growth division, focusing on maximizing existing relationships, Chloe's new business division, pursuing strategic acquisitions, and Lena's expanded creative department, supporting both with dedicated teams. "This structure recognizes a fundamental truth about our business," Edward continued. "Growth comes not just from new clients, but from identifying untapped potential in existing relationships." Harper's leadership in revitalizing our legacy portfolio demonstrated this principle conclusively. As Edward introduced me as Executive Vice President, the spontaneous applause from my team spread throughout the room. Even Chloe joined in, her earlier resentment replaced by professional respect. The transition wasn't seamless, of course. Some staff remained skeptical, viewing it as merely repackaging existing divisions. A few of Chloe's loyalists saw my promotion as undermining her authority, but the results quickly silenced most critics. Within 6 months, my division had increased revenue from existing clients by an astonishing 47%. Chloe's team, meanwhile, secured 3 new accounts in addition to Valencia. The agency's overall growth accelerated, creating new opportunities for staff at all levels. More subtly, the culture began to shift. The previous relentless emphasis on chasing new, prestigious clients was balanced by a newfound recognition of the value in nurturing established relationships. Account managers, once overlooked for promotions because they maintained boring accounts rather than landing flashy new business, now found their consistent client service newly valued and rewarded. 1 year after Edward had walked into my office with Chloe by his side, effectively demoting me, we gathered in that same main conference room for Prescott's annual all-staff meeting. The difference was palpable, not just in my elevated position on the executive team, but in the vibrant energy pulsing throughout the entire agency. Our performance this past year has exceeded all projections, Edward announced proudly. Revenue is up 32%. Staff retention has improved by 24%, and client satisfaction scores are at their highest level in our history. He acknowledged each division's contributions. When he reached the client growth division, his praise for me was unequivocal. Harper's leadership has transformed how we view existing client relationships, he stated. By identifying growth opportunities others overlooked, her team has generated over $12 million in incremental revenue while strengthening some of our longest-standing client partnerships. The professional vindication was deeply satisfying. But even more meaningful was the fundamental change in how we operated as an organization. The arbitrary distinction between prestigious and legacy accounts had dissolved, replaced by the profound understanding that every client represented potential value when properly served. After the meeting, James Atwood called me directly, something that had become a regular occurrence as our partnership deepened. "Harper, I'm hearing impressive things about Prescott's performance," he said, without preamble. "The restructuring you implemented seems to be working exceptionally well." I smiled at his assumption that I had implemented the changes, rather than simply catalyzed them through circumstance. "It's been a team effort," I replied diplomatically. "The new structure better recognizes and rewards the various ways we create value for clients." "Value recognition is rare in agencies," James observed. "Most chase novelty at the expense of substance. That's why we've decided to consolidate all our marketing with Prescott, including our international divisions." The expansion would nearly double the size of the Atwood account, making it one of our largest global relationships. More importantly, it represented absolute validation of our approach, focusing on client needs rather than agency convenience. Later that afternoon, I encountered Chloe in the kitchen area, both of us taking rare breaks between meetings. "Heard about Atwood's expansion," she remarked, preparing an elaborate espresso drink. "Congratulations. That's significant growth from your division." "Thanks," I replied. "Valencia's European launch is progressing well, too. Your team's regulatory navigation has been impressive." We'd settled into a relationship of professional respect, with occasional moments of genuine collaboration. Not friendship, exactly, but a productive partnership built on a recognition of complementary strengths. "You know," Chloe said, considering her coffee thoughtfully, "a year ago, I would have resented your success, seen it as diminishing my position somehow." "And now?" I prompted gently when she paused. "Now," she admitted, her gaze meeting mine, "I see that your success actually enhances mine. The stronger each division becomes, the more resources we all have for growth. It's not zero-sum." It was perhaps the most significant transformation of all, the recognition that individual advancement didn't require another's demotion. That collective success created more opportunity than internal competition ever could. As I returned to my office, Now appropriately located on the executive floor with a view rivaling Edward's, I reflected on the journey from that initial devastating demotion to my current position. The path had been neither direct nor easy, requiring strategic patience, principle-based decisions, and even uncomfortable collaboration with someone who had initially benefited from my setback. The lesson wasn't simply about perseverance or proving my value, though both had been necessary. It was about recognizing that organizational systems can change when their flaws become visible, that relationship capital often outweighs positional authority, and that sometimes the very person who seems to represent your professional obstacle can become an unlikely, powerful ally in transforming the environments that limited you both. My assistant interrupted these reflections with a reminder about my next meeting, the monthly review with Sterling Custom Furnishings, the very first legacy client whose untapped potential I'd recognized during those challenging, early days of demotion. Arthur Sterling greeted me warmly as I entered the conference room, his craftsmanship trained, I immediately noticing my ascent to the corner office. "Moving up in the world, Harper," he observed, a twinkle in his eye. "Though I hope not too far up to remember the clients who helped you get there." "Never," I assured him, with genuine appreciation. Some relationships have value beyond their immediate numbers. They reveal possibilities you might otherwise miss. It was true not just of client relationships, but of professional ones as well. Even those that begin with replacement and resentment can eventually reveal unexpected growth opportunities when approached with strategic patience and principled persistence. The echoes of that devastating day still linger, a reminder of how quickly your world can be upended by corporate politics. But it's also a powerful testament to the fact that passion, persistence, and a belief in your own value can reshape not just your career, but an entire organization. It wasn't about revenge. It was about proving that true value can't be sidelined, no matter whose family. I've faced down betrayal, built an empire from forgotten clients, and even forged an unexpected alliance. But tell me, after hearing my story, do you think I handled this the right way? Or would you have walked away? What would you do when faced with unfairness at work? Share your thoughts and your own stories in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious to hear your perspective.